The first thing that we see is Jesus comes to the tree and he's hungry. Now, that's a little bit odd because we're told that he just came from Bethany. We would assume that from Bethany he was staying with his friend Mary and Martha and their brother Lazarus. And we know that Martha was such a good hostess that she just was preparing food while Jesus was teaching. So we would assume that Martha didn't let Jesus leave that morning without having a good breakfast. So the idea that Jesus is hungry, he's not famished. He's not on the edge of starvation. Maybe they walked from Bethany, which was a partial day walk, and maybe he's kind of getting hungry. Maybe they didn't bring enough snacks or food on the way or whatever. Maybe he's getting a little bit hungry. But the idea here is that Jesus feels hunger. And in his hunger, he goes to this tree. So as his hunger brings him to the tree, what Jesus is representing for us is the one who is hungry for the righteousness of God. The one whom God is drawing to himself. And that one being drawn unto God, we're told in Matthew chapter 5, verse 6, Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount says, "Blessed be the one who hungers and thirsts for righteousness, for that one will be satisfied." So Jesus here is representing for us the one who hungers for the righteousness of God and is being drawn unto God in their hunger for his righteousness. Now, Jesus himself said that the one who is hungry for the righteousness of God will be satisfied, but Jesus himself, in this passage, is not satisfied because he comes to the tree to eat and finds nothing to satisfy his hunger. So he sees this tree and we're told that he sees it from a distance and he goes to the tree, and what about the tree attracts him? It's the leaves. The leaves are what attracts Jesus to go to the tree. And then Jesus is angry because the tree has leaves but no fruit. And then Mark says it wasn't the season anyway. So I did a lot of reading on fig trees, more than I really wanted to do. And just sort of, I don't want to weary us all with all that information about fig trees, but here's the bottom line. The bottom line is this. For the fig tree to be in leaf without figs meant that something was out of order. Because typically what happens with fig trees in the Middle East, fig trees here have two seasons. I think that most fig trees here have an early season and a late season. In Palestine, it's just one. But in Palestine, the fig trees and the figs and the leaves generally come together. So that when you see the fig tree in leaf, it also will have figs at least beginning to grow on it. Okay? So something here is out of order. So Jesus sees it. He sees the fig leaves and he's drawn to it because it seems to be saying to him, "Come and eat. Come and eat. Come and satisfy your hunger. Come unto me and satisfy your hunger." Jesus goes to it and finds that it's completely unsatisfying because there's nothing on it. And then he curses it. So Mark here seems to be rather preoccupied with fig leaves. What in the world do fig leaves mean in Scripture? Have you ever asked yourself, what do fig leaves mean in Scripture? What's the symbolic meaning of fig leaves? You know? Fig leaves actually only show up in our Bibles an extremely rare number of times. So they show up here. Mark's talking about fig leaves. Notice how he's sort of centered on the fact that the tree had leaves but no figs. We also see it in Matthew's parallel account, Matthew 21. Fig leaves are going to show up one more time in Mark's Gospel, chapter 13, when Jesus revisits the same subject to tell the parable of the barren fig tree that had leaves but no figs. Okay? So we see it here, the parallel account, a soon-to-come parable about the same thing, and nowhere else in all the Bible will you ever read of a fig leaf except one place. Anybody know where that is? Yes. Genesis chapter 3. Check me with your concordance if you like. Check me on anything if you like, but check me on the only other place in all of Scripture. You will find figs, you'll find fig trees. You will not find fig leaves mentioned anywhere except Genesis chapter 3. Now, Genesis chapter 3, we don't need to understand Genesis chapter 3 to understand this, but it sure helps. It shines an extra light on this. It puts it into vivid color. So let's remind ourselves of what's going on in Genesis 3. In Genesis chapter 3, the man and the woman have sinned. And we're told prior to their sin that the man and woman were naked and they were not ashamed. But then they eat of the fruit, they have sinned, and then what changes? What changes is now they're still naked, but now they are ashamed. And God comes into the garden and He calls for Adam. Adam hears God coming and he hides from God. Why? Because he was naked and ashamed. And so God comes and He calls for Adam. Where's Adam? Adam's hiding. He comes and God says, where were you? He says, I was hiding because I was naked and I was ashamed. Who told you you were naked? Did you eat of the fruit? The woman gave me of the fruit and I ate. Then comes the curse upon sin, right? And through all of that, we read in verse 11 there that the man and the woman did what? They sewed fig leaves together because they were naked and ashamed. So what the fig leaves are in Genesis 3 is man's first attempt at false religion. The fig leaves are works religion. Because that's what works religion is. It's doing something to cover the shame of our sin before God. And it can be anything of 1,000 different things. But doing something, whether it be go to Mass, go to confession, attend a church regularly, or some would say have their name on the roll of a church, or do this good deed, or what's becoming more and more popular today is to just be a nice person, be a tolerant person, tolerate divergent views. Whatever it may be, you can fill in the blank, but anything that you do to cover the shame of your sin before God is works religion. And the very first works religion was the loincloth from fig leaves. Because God came and the man and the woman knew that they had reason to now feel shame. And so they tried to cover their shame with their own efforts at these fig leaves. Then we learn later in the story, after God pronounces the curse, God then, in verse 25, we're told that God Himself said to them, these leaves will never work. And so God Himself fashions loincloths for them from animal skins. So 2 things that teaches us. Number 1, sin always requires a death. The wages of sin are death. So sin always requires a death. The leaves weren't going to work. An animal had to die in order to have the skin to cover. So that's the first thing. The second thing is God must do it. We're told specifically God made the loincloth for them. Their fig leaves weren't going to work. Can you imagine underwear made out of fig leaves, how long that's going to last? That just wasn't going to work. God says, this is what I must do. An animal must die, and I must fashion your covering for you. So that's the first presentation there of the gospel, to say works righteousness will not cover your shame. God Himself must cover your shame, and He has to do it through a sacrifice. Now, fast forward all the way to the New Testament, to the next time fig leaves appear. And the next time fig leaves appear, they appear where? On a tree that invites the hungry Jesus to come and be satisfied with my fruit. Come and eat of my fruit and satisfy yourself. And Jesus comes and there's no fruit. Do you see the connection? That's what the temple has been saying. Come, come. Those who are hungry for the righteousness of God, come and eat of our fruit. And they come and there's no fruit. There's nothing but empty works righteousness. There's nothing but empty sacrifices. There's nothing but empty hypocrisy in a den of robbers who are saying, we're safe because we do the right sacrifices. We're safe because we have the right coins. And Jesus says, be damned. This system of hypocrisy, the system of apostate religion. And so He curses the tree. And then we know that the next day the disciples come and the tree is dead, showing us, we are told, from the roots up. It withered from the roots. What does that say to us? That says to us that this tree didn't die from some atmospheric condition. This tree didn't die because it had some sort of fig tree disease. This tree died because God killed it. The parallel to this, of course, is going to come in Mark chapter 13, verse 2, when Jesus says, you see this temple? Not a single stone is going to be left on this temple. The other parallel, of course, is the curtain. Jesus is here to say, this fig tree is dead. This temple is dead because I'm here now. And after his sacrifice is complete, the temple veil will be torn from top to bottom to show that God did it, not a person, just like the tree has withered from the roots up to show that God did it, not a person. All of this is pointing to the death of the temple, which will come a few decades after Jesus' sacrificial death in the same sort of way. Israel, Jerusalem, the temple was not burned to the ground because the Roman army was stronger than the Israelites. The temple was burned to the ground because God did it. Because God said, this system, you've taken it. It was intended to teach you of the coming Messiah. Messiah has come and you perverted the system. You've turned it on its head. Now it's done.